Welcome to the Maria Liberati Show, where food meets art, travel, and life. So what does food mean to you? Well, this week's special guest is a travel expert. Actually, she's a women's travel coach, and she's going to give us some tips on how to get out of our comfort zone and travel the world. And we also have a travel blogger who's going to share with us a charming story about visiting Northern Ireland and baking Irish soda bread. Yum. And you know, summer is almost here. We're in spring, and many of us, including myself, like to garden. And, you know, not everybody has the space to make a large garden. So we have Amy Clark, who's a garden consultant from the Napa Valley, who's going to share some tips on how to start a container garden, no matter what size your space is. And I just want to mention to everyone that we are now joining terrestrial radio, and the first radio station that we are on is WWDB AM Radio 860 on the dial in Philadelphia. So stay tuned for more stations to be added around the country. But if you are in the Philadelphia area, you can now hear us on WWDB AM 860 on Saturdays at 1:30 to 2 p.m. And if you're not in the Philadelphia area, you can still listen online. Look for WWDB online, and you can hear the podcast there on WWDB. And a quick reminder, I will be doing a cooking class for the Bucks County Community College in Newtown, Pennsylvania on June 8th. It's a Dinner with Da Vinci class, and we always have fun doing that class. So if you'd like to register for the class, the registration is limited. Just call the college and tell them you want to take the continuing education class, Dinner with Da Vinci with Maria Liberati. And my special guest today is Aileen Carroll, and she is a garden consultant in the beautiful Napa Valley. Oh my goodness, I wish we were there today. I wish I was there interviewing you. It looks really beautiful. So Aileen, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Maria.
And I know we were just talking, and we wanted to give my listening audience some tips on and ideas on growing edible things in small containers. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
edible container gardening is great this time of year.
So I guess the first thing would be for somebody that's never done that, you know, how to get started.
Yeah, so you're going to need some sort of small containers. A lot of people like to put lots of herbs in one long container, maybe on a windowsill. That is one way to do it. But if you want to do it the best way, you might do a bunch of little pots outside of a kitchen door or a back door. Give each herb its own pot. And yeah, it's actually not too complicated, and it can really up your game in the garden because you'll have fresh herbs to play with as you cook.
So I just want to ask you, so you said you can do one long container and put the herbs there. So can you like put seeds for different herbs, obviously spacing them out, but can you do like different herbs all together in one long pot if somebody wanted to do that?
Yeah, if you did want to do that, I think I would recommend starting with little starts rather than seeds. You can start things from seeds, but that's going to be much more complicated, and it'll be harder to have good success.
Exactly. I've noticed that, you tell me, maybe it's just in my, I'm just like, I don't know. Maybe it's not true. It seems like if I grow, there are certain herbs that don't like to grow together. That's why I was asking you. Seems like rosemary is not that friendly with the other herbs. Is that right? Or is that just my imagination?
Yeah. No, that's true. Rosemary can be a bit of a bully, actually. Your average rosemary plant wants to grow multiple feet tall and wide. So when you try and squeeze it into a little pot with something like maybe thyme, that's going to max out at like 18 inches by 18 inches. not
Right.
really a fair competition. And then,
Exactly.
of course, mint is the other bully. You almost always, if you can, want to give mint its own container because it is very aggressive.
Oh, yes, definitely. Yes, that's what I've noticed that when I grow now, I only grow my rosemary separately and my mint separately also. So I know you said well, what would you recommend for somebody that's never done this before? Like, what should they grow in the containers? What are kind of things that are easiest, I guess, to grow, not complicated?
So almost any herb you can find at a local garden center is going to be easy to grow. So I always recommend people should grow exactly what they're interested in using in their garden. Because
Okay.
if you're interested in it, you're going to pay more attention to it and you're going to give it
Uh-huh.
better care.
Uh-huh.
So think about the type of cooking you want to do this summer and plant for that. Because I've made the mistake of planting oregano specifically, and I
Uh-huh.
never used it for a whole year. It just wasn't something that I was cooking with that year. Now I use oregano all the time, but
Right.
in that season of my life, that's not what I was using.
Okay, yes, and that's definitely a good tip because I know I have a large garden and I would grow things that I really didn't use or didn't eat. So I'd end up either having to trash it or find like a food bank to give it to. And it's like, duh, you should be only growing the things that you're going to use. So, yep, I guess that's the first thing. If it's something that you're going to use, then, then grow it. So, I know you told us, you were telling me that there are certain, I guess, things that do kind of like double duty, like keep mosquitoes away and that type of thing. So what
Exactly.
types of
Yes.
plants do that?
So one of my favorite things to do for my clients is to get some beautiful pots on the center of their outside dining table and fill them with either scented geraniums. You
Uh-huh.
can get citronella scented geraniums.
Uh-huh.
And fun fact, citronella candles actually have the essential oil from citronella plants.
Oh, wow.
But if you want an even stronger punch of anti-mosquito fighting power, plant
Mhm.
lemon balm and lemongrass.
Okay.
Those
Huh.
can be incredibly ornamental and be delicious and edible for your cooking and keep the mosquitoes away. So it's just a really wonderful thing for the summertime.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that's something wonderful to grow for this summer. So anything else other than herbs that people might be able to grow in the small containers? Any other vegetables or fruits or anything like that? I guess fruits, no, because I would think, well, maybe like a berry or something. Any?
Yeah, absolutely. So in Napa, we love to grow blueberries in containers. And you
Hmm.
can actually keep a blueberry container in something like a 10-inch pot for almost 10 years if you treat it right.
Oh, uh-huh,
Um, Blueberries really love actively decomposing acidic soil, and that's not what we naturally have here in Napa. So we fake
uh-huh.
it by putting them in containers with peat moss, bark, and some sort of acid planting mix.
Ah,
But that's something that has to be in a container around here. So have
yes.
fun with that and get a really fun blue ceramic pot. Get
Uh-huh.
maybe three types of blueberries because they like to cross pollinate with each other. And yes, you can have a little blueberry forest in a container garden.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's great. How about any kinds of vegetables? I'm sure like lettuce. I know lettuce is actually, I'm on the East Coast and it's really easy to grow. So just shoots up and everything. Spinach, I've not had that much luck with. I don't know why. What's up with,
Yeah,
but
I would imagine where you are, spinach is going to be more of a shoulder season vegetable. In Napa, we definitely recommend planting it more in the fall and have it grow through the winter. You can
uh-huh,
plant it in the spring, but our summer heat that we get here makes things like lettuce and spinach bolt and get more bitter. So usually we
uh-huh.
don't do those in the middle of summer.
Right, and you're absolutely right. Last year, our summer was brutal, and my lettuce was just really bitter. I ended up just buying it, unfortunately. So there you go. So that is a tip too for people if you're going to grow lettuce and it's extremely hot, then make sure you know it's going to probably be bitter, right? If it's out there in the sun, the blazing sun.
Yeah, but if you do love lettuce, you could
Uh-huh.
always harvest it as baby leaves, grow it in more of a shady location after it's sprouted.
Uh-huh.
So you can get fresh greens. It doesn't, as you probably know, if you grow your own lettuce, it doesn't take too much lettuce to make a salad. You get like maybe a
No.
6 pack of lettuce, and all of a sudden you have salads for weeks and weeks and weeks.
Exactly. Exactly. You're absolutely right. Any other vegetables you'd recommend growing in containers?
One of my absolute favorite, along with fruits, would be green beans combined with strawberries. Have you ever done a combination like that?
No, no. So tell me, why do they grow well together?
They just grow really nicely together. Yeah. So, of course, green beans come in kind of two different varieties or two different groups, I should say. There's the vining types and then, of course, the bush types. I highly recommend the bush types
Uh-huh.
for container gardening. They're a little bit more manageable unless you have a beautiful container with a trellis attached, maybe.
Uh-huh.
But yes, strawberries underplanted around some bush bean plants is beautiful and they're very happy growing together.
Wow, that's really interesting. How about something like potatoes? Can people grow those in a container?
I almost recommend people do grow things like potatoes in containers because you always, at the end of the harvest season, forget a potato in your bed and you're going to have potatoes there for the rest of your life. In a
Yes.
container, you can really keep them under control. But
So
yeah,
do
you can absolutely grow potatoes in containers. I recommend a bigger container than most people
right.
think.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes people put too many potatoes in a small container and you don't really get good results like that.
Oh, okay. Okay. That's interesting. So pretty much if anybody, even if they have a small space, if they don't have a lot of ground, they can actually grow fresh things then from what you're telling us and in small containers, small,
Yep, it's totally
medium-sized
possible.
containers. You can almost do anything. I know my grandfather lived in the city and he had this gigantic fig tree. I can just remember like in this little area in a in this container. So I guess you can basically grow almost anything, right? If you take care of them as well.
Yeah.
Um,
If you
so
take it
any,
to an extreme, it's kind of just like bonsai. So you
oh,
could
yes,
have something like almost like a dwarf fig tree or a dwarf fruit tree growing in a container. You just have to manage the top and the bottom to keep it in balance because it has a
uh-huh,
finite amount of space for the roots. You can't
right.
let the top get a lot bigger.
Okay. Okay. Very interesting. So, people know they can, just because you're limited with space, you can grow things. And I know on the East Coast, when it gets snowy and cold, we usually put things under those grow lights. So, I just bring my herbs in my basement, put it under my grow light, and then, or I have one actually in my kitchen too. So, but I imagine in the Napa Valley, can you grow things all year round outdoors?
You can grow a lot of things year round. Herbs, specifically things like basil, are pretty seasonal. They don't like the cold,
Uh-huh.
but a lot of herbs actually really do fine in the wintertime here.
Oh, that's great. That's wonderful. One last question. So, the herb that I really love, but I always have a hard time growing is dill. Anything
Mm-hmm.
on dill, is that like an easy thing to grow, or are there some, I'm not sure why. Is there a time of year that's better to grow that or certain temperatures?
Yeah, so that's another one that's going to be sensitive to frost. So I recommend planting dill in the spring. Most dill plants get pretty big, so be prepared for a larger plant, and then
Uh,
also be prepared to share your dill with caterpillars because a lot of butterflies like to lay their eggs on dill plants, swallowtails
oh,
specifically.
so that really attracts butterflies then. If you want to see lots of butterflies, you're going to have, oh, that's great.
Yeah,
Yeah,
most
yeah,
people think of planting flowers for butterflies, but equally
right.
important is planting food sources for the baby butterflies, the caterpillars.
Right, right. So I didn't know they like dill. That's interesting. Maybe that's where my dill was going, and I didn't realize it. That's great. Eileen, thank you so much for being here. And definitely, we're going to have you come back in the near future, and maybe we can talk about like once we get into the late summer, because I know that's a whole other growing season, planting
That
things.
sounds fantastic. Thank you for having me.
Discover the secrets of authentic Italian cuisine with the Basic Art of Italian Cooking book series, my Gourmand World Award-winning book series. From antipasti to dolci, these beautifully crafted cookbooks take you on a culinary journey throughout Italy. Peace, love, and pasta. And you can get your copy today at marialiberati.com or artoflivingprimamedia.com or Amazon or Kindle or your favorite bookstore. Taste the passion, savor the flavors, because cooking is an art.
So I have a special guest today. It's travel blogger Taylor Beal. And she is a travel blogger that has the blog named traversewithtaylor.com. And, I'm always inviting my listening audience to share special stories about travel or food. And Taylor has a special story she was going to share with us about Northern Ireland. Was this story on your blog?
It's not yet. It's in the works. It's one of those things I'm writing
Oh,
shortly.
wow. Okay, that's great.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
why don't you, unfortunately, I have never been to Northern Ireland. It's one of the places I do want to get to. But yes, so why don't you tell us your story?
Yeah. So I was on a trip back in November. I was scheduled to be we started in Dublin, right? And we kind of moved up the coast into Northern Ireland, and then we sailed across to Scotland. So it was an awesome 2-week trip. And we obviously were staying in Belfast. It's a pretty big area for people to stay in Northern Ireland. Most of the time, that's where people are going.
Yes.
But we didn't want to waste our day on the way up the coast. So we were trying to figure out, what do we do in the area? And a friend of ours suggested that we visit this farmhouse near this town called Colinchi on this beautiful waterway. And that she was like, listen, it sounds crazy, but you have to go to this farmhouse and bake Irish bread, Irish soda bread.
Yes.
You're like, I'm always trying to figure out how can I get out of places like Belfast. Not that they're not great, right? But to have a little bit more of an authentic experience. So
yes.
we went for it. And so we're driving up the coast, and we suddenly are on these back roads. They're like dirt roads. They're one lane.
It's been beautiful though.
So beautiful. Honestly, some of the most beautiful place that we've seen on the whole trip, honestly.
Oh, wow.
And we come across like this big waterway. The sun is setting, and we're like driving along the water, hoping that we don't, tip over into the water. And we get to this place where we can't drive any further, right? And so we call the woman whose farmhouse it is. Her name's Tracy. It's called Tracy's Farmhouse. We're like, hey, we can't take the bus any further. What do we do? And she's like, oh, get out and walk. I'll meet you down the lane. Okay. So we get out of the bus and we see this like road. Surely that has to be it. So we walk, and we're walking like along this old dirt road. There's, just beautiful nature all around us. And Tracy comes walking down this cobblestone walkway to the end of the street. And she's like, just the loveliest human. She's like, welcome. Hi, how are you? And we're like looking around like, are we in the right place? Are you sure this is what we're here for? So she's like, yeah, come on in. She's so warm and welcoming.
Right.
So she walks us up the lane, and I like stopped and took pictures of this road because, there's farmhouses, and there's, just locals out doing chores, and they're walking on the lane, and they're also friendly. And we walk about 5 minutes, and we come up to this beautiful cottage that has, a barn in the background. She's like, this is my home. Come on in. And it was really neat because it was actually like coming into someone's home. So I think a lot of times the experiences that maybe we book and think are going to be like that aren't actually like that. So we walk into Tracy's farmhouse, which is what it's called. And she has, just this beautiful old hutch with all these teacups, and it's warm. The floors are like flagstone. And literally it's her home. Like her family pictures are up. We're using, the bathroom that she and her family uses. You can see all like their coat racks and everything. It was just so real. And so it's really great. So she explained a little bit about what she does and who she is. And then in the middle of her kitchen, we just made Irish soda bread.
Oh, wow.
It was so great.
Great story. Yes.
Yeah. And then at the end, we have our little soda bread to eat and some to take home. She pulls out tea and all these homemade jams, and she distills her own gin and all this other stuff. And then she, has her little recipe book, and it just was so, I bought so much stuff to take home because it was so authentic.
Exactly.
Yeah, it was great.
That's great.
Yeah.
Love the story. Thank you so much. So Taylor we can find more stories like that. Travel. Tell me, I'm sorry, the blog again is
Traverse with Taylor.
Taylor.com.
Yeah.
Great. Well, if you have any other stories any other interesting stories that relate to food, please write write us again. We can have you come on, and I'm sure you have lots being a travel blogger.
Yes, definitely. All around Europe.
I guess so. Yes, definitely. All right, Taylor, thank you so much.
Thank you.
This is for our advice segment is Amy Goober, and she's an action coach for women, and she helps women kind of get out of their comfort zone also for travel, because we're all about travel here too. And anyway, Amy's got some advice for us on, and she's also got a women's traveling group, right, Amy? Wandering Women?
Yes, Wandering Women. Yes.
Women. And she has a website, amygoober.com. So
yes.
I know you'll all want to check it out after you hear what she's going to tell us. So Amy, tell us, how do we break out of our comfort zone? And, because a lot of people, I think, are afraid to just get out there and push themselves out there and travel.
Yes. And I think, I think there's a couple of different things. I'll tell you sort of my angle on it. And then I'd like to give your audience like some steps they can take so that, they can move forward.
Yes.
So I believe, we have two choices at whatever stage we're at. You can either kind of expand your world or you contract it, right?
Yes.
I think as women, and as we get older, it seems easier to stay home. And as you mentioned, the pandemic, it's drawn us more inward, and it's been a little more challenging to get out of that. But for me, I feel like you have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And that's sort of a phrase that I use. And for the trips that I run, most of the women don't know me. They've never met me, right? They don't know me. They stumble on me or they get referred to me. So I want to make them comfortable from the beginning. So one of the things that I do is I do a phone call before anyone can even sign up for any trip.
Right.
Mainly because I want them to know me and see if I'm what they're looking for, right?
Exactly.
And then them ask questions, etc. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is when these, potential travelers, what can they do? How can they just, poof, go from nervous to fine. So here's some strategies that I would recommend. One is you acknowledge it. Say to yourself, you can look yourself in the mirror or say to a friend, you know what? I'm uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable with the thought of travel or whatever the thing is, right?
Right.
And sometimes when you acknowledge things, it's sort of the level goes down, right?
Right.
And it's okay. You know what? I'm feeling uncomfortable. Okay, now you move past that. And then I suggest that you really research what it is you want to do, because sometimes knowledge is power.
Yes.
So the more you learn, like, again, my women, they have a great website and there's all kinds of testimonials. I speak to them, but for any travel at all, research it. And I'm not saying research the country, but research what the trip is going to be like.
Right.
What are people saying about maybe that tour company? Because again, when you learn more, you can feel more comfortable, right?
More comfortable, yes.
It's less unknown and more familiarity. So that's sort of another tactic. And it may seem obvious, but sometimes people just don't even think of that.
Right, exactly.
And then testimonials. I find testimonials, even right when you're going to look for a restaurant, don't you look and see the reviews? So when you're thinking about travel, if you're going to go with a company or a tour guide or yourself, start looking at testimonials, and maybe it really rings true. Maybe some woman says, this was totally out of my comfort zone. I was so scared, but I'm so glad I went. Maybe it resonates with you what one or another person might say, and you hear it in their voice.
Right.
Video, but certain written testimonials. So I think that's another way to sort of bring the comfort level, bring down the discomfort or anxiety, if we want to really call it that.
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
And then I always say, consider the alternative. What's the alternative? We all stay.
Exactly.
That's your alternative. You just stay home. And sometimes we have to remind ourselves, right, that we have a choice here. And the alternative is to contract and to not experience life.
Exactly.
And so I sometimes, I do a little nudge because I want to remind people that they don't have to go, but by not going, making a decision also.
Exactly.
And lastly, one of my sayings is the things we regret in life are typically the things we don't do.
Exactly.
Right? Rarely would somebody say, oh, I never should have gone on that trip. When do you hear anybody say that? Unless something happens that's, out of their control. So I try to remind people of that. It's like, let's just think about this. take the leap. And so those are some of my strategies. I don't know. What do you think about that? Does that like
No,
resonate with?
that sounds perfect. Because as I said, after the pandemic, I was having that same issue, and myself being a traveler all my life, really traveling all over the place. And then the pandemic forced us to be home. And it's kind of like, you're jumping in the pool again, when you're a child, and it's like, just jump in. I remember I wouldn't go in the water. My mom or dad would say, just jump in, and that's what you have to do. You have to force yourself to just jump in. It's kind of the same thing. So I think they're all great strategies. And yes, I know traveling really it expanded my life. It expanded my world. That so many experiences that I get from traveling, that I just would never have imagined if I did not travel. So, there's just so much that you learn from travel. I think it's really something important to do.
One other thought that I have as we're chatting, for people that are uncomfortable or it feels like a leap, is take a smaller step first. Maybe go for a weekend or
Exactly.
a 4-hour drive away. If you
Yes,
need to, like, do it gradually, an overnight, a weekend, go by car first, then say, okay, then I'll go
exactly.
by plane, stay in the US, and then maybe branch out to Canada, and then maybe go to
Exactly.
Europe. And there's nothing wrong with that, because I think that those
Exactly.
steps can build our comfort zone too.
Exactly.
And I guess one more thing I would say is you don't know what you don't know. So what you don't know is what you're missing out on. And that
Exactly.
is what at least the women that I hear back from on my trip say. We
Uh-huh.
never could have imagined that we would
Exactly.
have, St. Augustine, or we never could have imagined that we would have made these great connections. So use your imagination and realize, like, there's so much out there.
Out there. And I like the idea that, it's not like you have to go across the world to
No.
start. Just like you said, do a small trip, somewhere, even if it's only a short distance, like an hour away or 2 hours away, just a short trip, and gradually, get into wherever it is you might want to go if it's a little further. But even a short distance trip where you can just stay one night. Exactly.
And then you build your confidence that way.
Exactly.
You're sort of like, another notch on the belt, like you're just feeling a little more confident, a little more comfortable, because we're talking about being comfortable.
Right.
And some of it is just like, I love what you were saying about how the jumping in the pool,
Right.
as a parent, you wanted to just like tap their shoulder, like the lightest, just so they'd go in to see that
Right.
nothing to be afraid of.
Exactly. Exactly. It's the same thing. But I love it. I think it's great. And that's wonderful. And I know you told me you get such positive response from women. So I could imagine, because you're actually helping them to experience, travel, which is so much
Right.
fun. So Amy, where can people find you? Is it they can go to your site, amygoober.com?
Yep, Goober. So it's like the candy. So it's amygoober.com, and my trips are on there, and I do lots of other things, but I'm very motivated to connect people and then offer, opportunities. And I think by doing the planning and all of that, it makes it so easy for them. And then they can
Yes.
just enjoy it and not be like nervous, because I'm like the person, like the boots on the ground.
Yes.
Somebody who's in charge of making sure they're happy and they're all getting along and all these things.
Exactly. And that's so important, especially for like somebody that's just starting to travel. So they don't really have to worry about anything. And it's just a really nice experience. So they kind of have like their own concierge, right? So to speak. So
Well, right. And I
taken
do
care of
say,
that.
yes, and I say that, I say I'm not a travel agent.
Uh-huh.
I'm a coach. So I'm the one at the dinner table, and I'm looking, up and down the table. And I'm making sure everyone's chatting, and, like I'm that person.
Can
So
I ask you, I don't want to interrupt you, but I think it's such a wonderful idea. I didn't even know there was anyone out there doing this. How did you get that idea to become to coach women to do something like this for travel?
Yeah, thank you for asking. Yeah, so I've been an action coach for women, and to me that I made up that title. To me that means, helping women move forward on whatever it is that matters to them. So somebody a few years ago said, like, what about planning trips, and retreats for women? And I'm someone who would say, like, okay. And then I did it and I started doing it, and
Right.
I saw the need. And I evolved it so that I kind of have a system now. And so what happens is some women repeat. They might have been on one trip with me, and then a lot of them are new. So I have just seen, I just have seen not just the growth, but the friendships, because we're so thirsty for connection in the world we're in now, I
Yes.
believe.
Mhm.
And so a lot of times people move away, or, whatever it is, especially
Yes.
as we get older.
Uh-huh.
And and they come from all over the country. Like we have twin 63-year-old sisters from California that have come east for 2 trips.
Oh, wow.
Things like that. Idea kind of came to me. Someone suggested it, and I just ran with it because I said, I
Great.
think need
Yes, yes.
for this.
Yes, definitely. Well, that was great. It's definitely a great idea, and I can definitely see a need for that. Amy, thank you so much for being with us and sharing your tips. And hopefully, we'll have you back in the near future to share some other things with us, other tips also and advice. Great. Thanks, Amy.
Thanks, Maria.
Thanks for listening to the Maria Liberati Show, and thanks to my producer, as always, Britton Roselle, and my special guest this week. And a reminder, you can also hear us now if you're in the Philadelphia area. You can also hear us on Saturdays at 1:30 Eastern Standard Time on WWDB AM, that's 860 on the dial. And if you're not in Philadelphia, you can also hear the radio show by going to WWDB online. And a quick reminder about my cooking class that I will be doing for the Bucks County Community College in Newtown, Pennsylvania on June 8th. You can find out more about the class by looking up Bucks County Community College online and look for Dinner with Da Vinci. That's the course that I will be doing, or give the college a call. They're in Newtown, Pennsylvania. And again, the class will be on Saturday, June 8th. And if you have any travel or food stories that you would like to share with our audience, please email us. Send us an email at info@marialiberati.com, and someone on our staff will reach out to you. We love hearing stories like the lovely story we heard about visiting Northern Ireland and baking Irish soda bread today with Taylor Beal, who is a travel blogger. So if you have a story you'd like to share, please reach out. We'd love to hear from you. And as always, you can find me at marialiberati.com, on Facebook at Chef Maria Liberati, on Instagram at Maria Liberati, on Twitter at Maria Liberati. Let's see, on Vimeo at Maria Liberati. You can also see video of most of our podcasts on the Maria Liberati Show channel on YouTube. And until next week, peace, love, and pasta.